Good evening, everybody. I will get our work session started. Our first work session is with Brian Grogan on the Southwest Suburban Cable Commission, and we'll go till 5:45. Thank you so much for coming. And I'll pass it to City Manager Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and council members, Brian Grogan's firm provides the administrative and legal support for the Southwest Suburban Cable Commission. And the Southwest Suburban Cable Commission is local cities, including Richfield, and they enforce our 2 franchise agreements with our cable companies, both Comcast and CenturyLink. And recently, the FCC has issued the 621 order, which we believe will undermine local interests in enforcing those cable franchises. And so Brian is the expert on this, and he is leading the charge in our legal challenge that we joined.
Thank you very much, mayors and members of the council. Again, for the record, my name is Brian Grogan. I'm with the Minneapolis law firm of Moss and Barnett. As the city manager mentioned, have been working with the Southwest Commission now for probably 20 years or so, doing this type of work. The commission is Edina, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Hopkins, and Richfield. And we work pretty closely with Bloomington in terms of holding hands on studio facilities, allowing your residents to utilize their television studio for programming. This 621 order came out last fall. We knew it was coming. We just didn't know how bad it would be, if I can be blunt. Let me give you a little background before we get into the specifics of the 621 order. You may have been grappling lately with issues regarding small cell facilities, trying to take over light posts and other things. About a year or more ago, the FCC granted the cellular industry a fair amount of relief from what were traditional regulations that they would have had to comply with to use your streets and rights of way to put up these facilities. On the one hand, we love broadband service, of course. We like to have great service for our businesses and our residents, but using city assets nearly for free of charge was a big blow to cities, and has certainly hurt here in Minnesota as well. This order is almost like a round 2 for the FCC to now try to level the playing field for the cable industry, who also uses the right-of-way and who provides a broadband and video product. You know, keep in mind, if we think of Comcast, most people subscribe to them by broadband, video, telephone, maybe even their mobile service as well. And this order was attempting to try to do everything the FCC could to level the playing field in terms of the cost of the right-of-way. It's just that they have a federal law that gets in their way, and that's what this challenge will be about. So this order came out, it was actually adopted in August, it became effective in September. What this particular order does, different than the small cell order, just deals with cable television. So cable TV is one of the last things that cities can actually regulate. You don't regulate telephone, that's regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, and nobody regulates broadband. Oddly, it's still operating under the theory that it's such a fledgling industry that it couldn't possibly succeed if we had regulation of it. Clearly, that's a little bit of a dated concept, right? I mean, as we watch retail stores close left and right because of over-the-top, services on the web. But at any rate, what they did is the FCC now, which is 3 administration-appointed officials and 2 Democrat-appointed officials. So you always have, the administration's always going to have a majority on every agency, right? That just comes with the turf. So all of these votes are 3-2. And what this represents is a very pro-industry approach to regulation, more deregulation than historically has been in place. This particular order, which we're calling the 621 order, doesn't apply retroactively. It only applies going forward. But the September date is important because that is basically the effective date. It would apply to any franchise, whether it's issued state or local. In Minnesota, everything is adopted locally. But if you were in Illinois, for example, that's adopted at the state level. So it applied, what they were trying to do is all 50 states, no matter what, everybody's subject to this. All right, so what does this do? 2 or 3 big things. First thing it said is mixed use. And I gave you the bullet points here, but let me try to put it into my language, which is usually about 6th grade level. What it says is, because cable already has a black wire in the right-of-way, and they already pay you a 5% franchise fee as compensation for the right-of-way, we're not going to charge them then for anything else that they put in the right-of-way. So they can hang Wi-Fi facilities up on those wires. They could put up small cell facilities, which they are doing on those wires. They could put up a backup generator on your boulevard to power that, or other repeater services, routers, you name it. Anything they want to do, it's all considered part of the cable system, even if it has nothing to do with delivering video signals. And you are now prohibited under this rule from regulating it in any way. You can't charge them a fee. You can't put in place any different regulations. It basically preempts anything you might ever want to do on broadband services. Many states around the country were actually saying, look, we're going to impose some fees if you want to put all these facilities in our right-of-way because that's public property. The argument goes, if Walmart wanted to have a store on our Central Park, we might be in favor of it, but we sure as heck would charge them fair market rent for the property, right? Here, that's the issue, is this would take them completely out of any payment obligations. Also applies to an issue called PEG Capital. We have in our local franchise here in Richfield, public educational governmental programming. Your channel, obviously, the Richfield Government Channel is one of those. It talks about what is or isn't a PEG fee and what you can and can't spend that money on. That's something that your city administrative team pays close attention to because they can't commingle those funds with general revenue funds. They have to be earmarked for a specific purpose. And here the FCC is trying to further limit what Richfield can actually spend those dollars on. Probably the thing that gets cities most concerned in the short term is this thing called in-kind franchise obligations. So what the FCC is saying here is if your franchise includes anything over and above a franchise fee or a PEG fee, they're going to consider it an in-kind obligation, meaning you negotiated this obligation of the operator, but we think the operator should be able to assess you a charge for that. So here in City Hall, for example, I walked in, you may have your city government channel up on the screen there. Or you might someday put on the NCAA tournament, because that might be a popular thing for folks to watch. Who knows? At schools, public buildings, fire stations, police stations, for the last 35 years, Comcast has provided complimentary service as an in-kind benefit for your franchise. Now that sounds like not a big deal, but if they're allowed to charge fair market value, that could be about $80 per connection, per location, 12 months, 10 years. I mean, those add up in a hurry. Those are tens of thousands of dollars in-kind obligations. More importantly, probably, is the cost that they would be able to charge for the fiber connection that comes to this city hall that transports your city council meetings or the school board meetings, or you name it, all the things that we have put into our franchise that allow for the content to be put on those channels. That's a fairly robust network of fiber. In fact, we have negotiated for fiber to go to Bloomington to pick up the public access channel, bring it over to Edina, insert it at Edina, take it to the Comcast head end, and then out to all 5 cities so that the residents can watch the programming. If you put a fair market value on that, it's difficult to understand how much that would be, how it would get paid. And I'll talk in a moment about the fact that they kind of just gets to establish a fee and then potentially offset it or deduct it from your franchise fees, which makes it incredibly difficult to budget for this kind of a thing. So they did not touch customer service or build-out obligations, but they made a promise that within 12 months, remember it became effective in September, so we're almost halfway through that now, but in 12 months they were going to let another shoe drop. This time, the FCC said we're going to let the industry charge cities for the fair market value of the channel itself. So how much is your channel worth? I mean, there isn't a market for that, but I suppose you could say, well, if we could sell it to ESPN, it'd be worth a lot of money, or ABC, or the Comedy Channel, or you name it, it might have a significant fair market value to Comcast. If they were to start to charge the city of Richfield or the Southwest Commission for that, and really think of that as one and the same, because the commission only exists at the pleasure of the city, so it's only here because you want it to exist. It's the same money. if that money gets charged off against your franchise fees, it's going to put a hard position for the city elected officials to have to say, do we want to continue with this channel or do we want our money? I mean, we do have a budget here and we don't want to have pressure on tax rates. So those are some significant issues. The FCC also said, well, we're going to put in place a modification process. So we're going to have, and I'll pick on Comcast for a moment, but it could be CenturyLink or any other operator. The FCC encouraged, you see that in quotes, they said, we think it'd be a good idea if the cable industry came and talked to cities about this, and we think they should talk for about 120 days and see if they can reach an agreement. The emphasis there was on encouraged. They're not required to. In other words, the cable operator could just say, you know what, fair market value for all this stuff is, I'm just throwing a number out here, 50 grand. And so, city manager, we're just gonna take 50 grand off your check. And then she's left to say, wait, how do I know that is true fair market value? How'd you come up with that? Well, the money's gone. And as a lawyer, still the adage of possession's 9/10 of the law. If you don't have the money, now the burden's on you to go get the money. That's not a position you want to be in. So we filed a lawsuit, and not just we. You were in good company with well in excess of 100 different cities around the country. You see the list of cases there, but keep in mind that just that one that we're involved with, the city of Chicago was a client of mine. It just so happened that Chicago was the first name on the list. On that same case is Seattle, Tacoma, Denver, a lot of Colorado communities, a lot of Minnesota communities, Bloomington, well, I would say probably 20 or more Minnesota communities are on that. Each one of those cases has another collection of cities from a different region of the country. Collectively, well over 100 jurisdictions. We've been playing inside baseball for a while. We started in the DC circuit, we got kicked out to the 9th Circuit, then we got moved over to the 6th Circuit. We're in the 6th Circuit now, and all the cases have been consolidated, and we are now under a case name called the City of Eugene, Oregon, simply because they were the first ones to have filed the lawsuit. So all the cities are under one case. We are all holding hands with each other, trying to work through this. The Southwest Commission, and it is the commission, not the city of Richfield, that's involved in this lawsuit because it was easier to share the cost. All chipped in and are part of this. So what do? We asked the court to overturn this 621 order. Standard things here, you'd say it's arbitrary, capricious. That's typically what a government would say about a government decision. Violates the law, the Constitution, the Cable Act itself, and the FCC's own regulations. Said it does all those things. We've already briefed out a 50-page brief, but we haven't submitted it yet because it's not due, but that's just the basic complaint. A little more inside baseball here, though. Because this is such a devastating order, we had to ask the FCC to stay this. And everybody's kind of familiar with stays. We read about them in the paper these days. If you want to file a claim against the, let's say it's the FDA, because they're going to allow oil to be spilled into the ocean, you ask the court to stay immediately. Put an injunction out there and don't let this happen, because once the oil's in the ocean, I can't get it back. So please stop and consider the case first, then decide whether to let the oil go in. We asked that. We started with the FCC because you have to ask the agency first, and then we went and asked the court. I'm going to cut through a lot of this and say, in the FCC's attempt to clarify why they weren't going to issue a stay, they went out and they said, yeah, but we put into our order the fact that you have to negotiate a new negotiate a change to a franchise, and the operator, last line there, operator has to prove that the terms of the franchise violate the order and has to get the franchise amended. And we looked at that and we said, well, okay, now we're starting to talk about something here. Now we actually have a chance. They can't just unilaterally change it. The day that was issued in November, the cable industry went knocking on the FCC's door and said, we don't like that. We want you to change it. And lo and behold, the FCC decided they just issued this on February 11th. They deleted all the language that was favorable to the cities that they put into their denial of the stay, and they switched it back to say it's optional. Industry, maybe you have to say something, maybe you don't. So we asked the court. We said, look, the agency isn't going to do anything about this. How about 6th Circuit? Will you do anything?
Sixth Circuit did something even more unusual. It's an emergency request. Usually, court just either decides yay or nay. In this case, they decided to issue an oral argument. We asked for it on December 4th. We're not even getting an argument until March 11th. All this has done is just put a huge cloud over the whole cable industry nationwide. Nobody knows what the rules are until somebody tells us. So here we sit, waiting for this March 11th oral argument. We don't even have a briefing schedule. What that means is we're not going to have a decision on this case until 2021. There's no way at this point in the year, if we haven't even filed a brief, that we're going to get this case decided. Here's what we're waiting for. We're waiting to see if the FCC or if the court will issue a stay, in which case that's like the court saying the order isn't effective until we decide the merits of the case. If they deny that, then the industry can go ahead and start implementing it, and then we hopefully would get it overturned in the final decision, but that'll still be, like I say, nearly a year from now. This has garnered so much attention that legislation's been introduced in Congress. Unfortunately, just like everything, my Grogan bias here, nothing seems to be bipartisan anymore. So we got a whole bunch of people that really want this and a whole bunch of people that really don't want this. The realistic cards say this is not going to pass in an election year. It's just not going to happen. There's probably a couple hundred House members signed on, but there's a couple hundred more that will never sign on. So right now you have this proposed legislation protecting the Community Television Act. It's not going to go anywhere. So, and all the politics aside, we're really talking about city rights here. So I don't even worry about what's going to happen in the election. The issue is, is this order supported by the law or is it not? Period, end of story. That's what we're fighting about. So that's kind of going to be nearly the conclusion of my presentation. This is what we're fighting about. The commission is involved in it. We are trying to send out updates, but it's been a lot of trying to figure out the shape of the table so far, as you can tell. But the ultimate impact to the city will be the future of, are you going to be able to have that channel? Are you going to be able to retain all your franchise fees? Are you going to be able to keep your PEG fees? Oh, and by the way, the city is in the middle of a renewal process now with Comcast. So we are within the window of time when we're supposed to be renegotiating, and we have this hit us, which means it's very difficult for us to make plans. Even if you said, the world's changing, I want to get out of the business of having a local government channel, I want to move to a web-based communication method, or Instagram, or Facebook, or LinkedIn, or whatever your social media preference is, it's hard to plan a transition if the rug's going to get pulled out from under you. So that's why this is worth the effort to fight over. So let me pause and answer any questions I didn't cover.
First, thank you so much for your presentation and sharing this information with us. Any questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Whalen?
Couple thoughts. One, I appreciate you trying to say that it is separate from politics. I feel like even our court system seems to be more political than nonpartisan lately. I guess it sounds like conceivably if the case is not, if we're gonna kind of be in limbo through 2021, that potentially if we had a different president who would then pick different three people to be on the FCC, that we could potentially see another change before this case is even decided?
Certainly, a change in administrations would result in a change of the agency. You would then have a flip, right? So you'd have 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. So then the status of this order would be very much in question as to whether it would go forward in the same manner. That's true.
And then my other question was, given that we're currently in negotiations, I guess in this limbo period, like what is that? Are we assuming that we're operating under the new act and have to move forward as if a stay is not going to happen? Are we still under the old rules, or is it really unknown and that's part of what makes it complicated?
a little bit of your last statement. It is
Okay.
a little bit unknown. But what, your city administration is rightfully asking is, well, what do we do for budget? How, we plan a year ahead. What's our anticipated, if not 2020, what's our 2021 impact? And so we have to operate on the assumption that we lose on everything, and we are going to see a potential negative impact on franchisers. You have to budget that way, hope to be surprised the other way. What we're more concerned about than 2021 is an immediate impact in 2020. If this stay order goes against us, and I'm not pinning anything on Comcast or any other operator, but technically there's an argument to say you could go all the way back to September 26th, assess the fair market value of all these obligations, and just because you didn't deduct it in the first quarter or the second quarter, first 3 months after that went effective, you could wait till June, July, and then say, we're going to do a catch-up. We're just going to go ahead and assess this. And we have very little ability to know what that amount will be. So that's where we feel hamstrung, is if we could put pen to paper and give some estimates, then it would help your budgeting office, your controller work on that. We don't. It could be that Comcast says, you know what, we're not going to do anything in 2020. We're going to wait and see what the ultimate outcome of the case is. But we don't know the answer to that either. And in fairness to the Comcast staff, they're very responsive and they answer questions, but the local staff doesn't know. These decisions are being made in Philadelphia, where they're headquartered, and I'm not even sure everybody in Philadelphia knows until they get clarification. So it's tough.
So, are you recommending action of any kind for the folks in the commission, or what can we be doing?
I don't have any requested action for the council. Purpose, I think, of my presentation today was to bring you up to speed with the status of this, make you aware of it, so that when we are able to provide further update, you have context for what that will mean. However, I think maybe, we do have something.
Yeah.
I'll let you talk.
Thank you. Mayor and council members, actually, I had sent out a resolution, a proposed resolution that would support our position, that we could add to the next meeting if you felt comfortable with that. And then there's also a letter that we can send that the mayor and I could sign.
But that's just showing our support. I mean, it's no prepper. We're not going to be preparing for anything internally with our budgeting.
As we enter into negotiations with Comcast and get a better idea of that, yes, we can adjust the budgeting.
Okay. Councilmember Supple.
I don't know if other people have read the resolution, but I read it and I thought it was very well written, so I appreciated that. And also thank you for the presentation, because I learned a lot from that.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Councilmember Whalen?
Yeah, I'll just add in, I would support the resolution being added to our next agenda as well.
Absolutely. Any other comments or questions? We thank you so much. This is very scary and very concerning and infuriating. And we thank you for your work in representing our cities and working with cities across the country to defend our residents and our rights as municipal government in this process. So we look forward to getting an update.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. I will start 2 minutes early on our work session on organized collection with our Park and Rec Department, and I will pass it again to our City Manager Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and council members, we are back tonight. As you know, we were well on our way to organizing our recycling and organics and hit some speed bumps. So we paused that and have done some further research. And Director Markle and Sustainability Specialist Rachel Lindholm are here tonight and have we'll bring you up to date on where we're at right now, present some options going forward, and what we're looking for from you all tonight is some consensus on what next steps could be. So without anything more, I'll ask Amy to take it over.
Yeah,
Thank you. And good evening, and thanks for having Sustainability Specialist Rachel Lindholm and myself here tonight to talk about organized collection. We're going to just refresh everyone's minds on kind of where we've gone with some of our sustainability goals, where we're at, kind of the background of the county mandate, the success of our drop-off program, some of our options moving forward that we have, and we have, probably just enough time to pursue any of them, and really just looking for some direction, which direction you'd like to go as a council. So we'll open it up to discussion and questions then at the end. So just to refresh everybody, in looking at the county goals, by the year 2030, it's our county goal to have a recycling rate of 75%. And currently we're at approximately 50%. So we're doing great. Hennepin County's rate in 2017, the last metric that was taken was 41%. So we're moving along. There was a revision in the Hennepin County solid waste ordinance. It's the revision 13. And that had businesses by January 1st of this year implement organics recycling, and for residents of Hennepin County, it's by January 1st, 2022. And in this revision, cities with more than 10,000 residents must make organic service available to all households with curbside organics recycling. And that would be single-family homes and dwellings up to 4 people.
Just a quick note about this graph. It's from the MPCA, so it's not only for Hennepin County, but it is a metro-wide goal of hitting 75% by 2030. And obviously, the increase is not currently enough to jump about 34% in 10 years.
When you look at annual recycling rates in Hennepin County, you can see Richfield is one of 2 cities, along with Eden Prairie in the county, that we don't have organized single source recycling. And this can be correlated with our lower recycling rate, less education outreach with residents. We have increased contamination. You want to see what you're saying? Okay. And we implemented our drop-off program. So as you know, we have our facility at Hope Church and a second one at Woodlake Nature Center where residents can sign up and drop off their organic material. And currently we have about 850 homes, or households that are signed up. And that can be translated to several thousand residents. Through a grant through Hennepin County, we've been able to successfully launch and maintain this program. We also have increased our education and outreach through website improvements, emails, tabling at the co-op and our farmers market, and different media coverage. Residents seem to be very receptive and glad that we're promoting sustainability initiatives and following others when it comes to organics. We did survey the households involved with our organics drop-off program to get feedback, and the majority of those that participated said they hadn't composted before the program, and now the majority drop off their organic waste, and not just food waste, but it can include like paper towels, napkins, all the other things that are compostable once a week. We've gotten feedback that they're very appreciative of the program, and it's decreased a lot of households' garbage, and they become more mindful of the overall amount of waste that they're generating. And looking at some of the comments we got when we did our survey, you can see that people are very excited to start participate in this program. They're looking forward to this as a curbside pickup option in the future. People said they love organics recycling. They want it at their home ASAP. So there's definitely some support, with our program and even outside of the program to have curbside organics recycling.
There, obviously, a lot of these are positive feedback, and that's what we look for when we gauge how successful a program's being, but we've also gotten a fair amount of feedback on how to improve the program, and our biggest feedback is, more sites or curbside collection, which we understand. We've also had residents say that they aren't going to participate in an initiative like this until it is curbside, whether that's for convenience reasons or accessibility reasons. all of which are completely valid. So it's really an effort to get, a program like this and also traditional recycling and obviously waste services to be as accessible and convenient for all residents in Richfield.
Yeah, so to meet the mandate in 2022, all households 4 units or less need to have the opportunity to have curbside organics recycling. As you know, we went out with our RFP, and we were kind of well on our way down that path. And then as City Manager Rodriguez stated, we ran into some bumps along the way. So Rachel's just going to kind of refresh you in some of those speed bumps.
So we got our first letter from a group called Garbage Haulers for Citizen Choice after the RFP closed at the end of last year in November. And their general legal concerns were that they thought we should be following the state statute for organizing collection, which details a specific procedure, even for recycling and organics. And obviously we held a different opinion. We subsequently got another letter from them a few months later, I believe it was early January, and we followed that up with a meeting with the PCA and Hennepin County. We also had a previous meeting with Garbage Haulers for Citizen Choice, just trying to get everyone on the same page. What does the statute, cover? Does it cover recycling organics? It's pretty vague. It generally talks about solid waste, and so it really depends on how you define solid waste. And so we had several conversations with our city attorney, Mary Teachin, and just kind of going back and forth. And essentially the MPCA said that they weren't really supporting that the previous statements that may have indicated that recycling was not included, and therefore we wouldn't have to follow. So they kind of backtracked a little bit to be on the safe side. So taking that into account, we felt less comfortable going ahead and with that argument without the backing of an agency. And so we kind of took a step back and wanted to bring forth updates to you all on what this would mean for our sustainability initiatives and our goals of increasing regular recycling, bringing curbside recycling to residents, all of these things as we try and become, an environmentally sustainable city. So we paused the process and we communicated with the hauler that we were intending to negotiate with from the RFP. And we've done a lot of outreach with the League of Minnesota Cities and again, the MPCA and the county commissioner to try and get a legislative definitive solution. It's not, we don't have a solid answer at this point, and we're unsure how long that might take to get a solid legislative opinion or, amendment to the statute or anything like that. So in the meantime, we've pulled together the options for the next steps, and there's a lot of different options because there's a lot of uncertainty here. So this is kind of the different options we have, and then the A and B usually go to timeline, when do we want to start said option. And so I'll go through all the pros and cons of these options. Straightforward, they're pretty much options that you've seen in past work sessions. Number one is we would follow the state statute procedure for organizing solid waste collection, and we would organize everything. So that's trash, that's recycling, that's organics as well. And then obviously A and B, wait and see. A is wait and see, take our time, research, come back to another work session, create a plan that's more of a definitive timeline on what this takes, what this means for the city. When should we start it? What makes sense for, starting a program, which is not the middle of winter kind of thing. Or B, start now. Number two, do not organize at all, nothing. We leave the system as it is, and then to fulfill the county mandate, haulers would be licensed. Every hauler that's currently licensed would be also licensed for organics collection. Then the onus is on residents to sign up for the organics program, and as we've seen in other cities, it does not make for a very successful program. It also makes it far more expensive because you don't have that, negotiating power, that leverage power, the number of households participating. And then number three, this is the option that in the previous work session we strongly discouraged, but we did keep it on here, following state statute for organizing solid waste collection, but leaving trash alone. We will go into pros and cons. This is still the same one that we did not recommend as staff, but it does have those timing considerations as well. So the first one is our staff recommendation. Follow state statute procedure to organize everything. Pros and cons. Pros, we would tackle it all at the same time, whereas that other option, if we just did recycling and organics, we might do trash in the future. We have to go through the same statute procedure. It doesn't make sense. This, everything will be done at once. There's limited chance of legal challenge because there's immunity written into the statute. Obviously, we've talked about the environmental benefits. Negotiating the best price for residential services. I'll go into talk about why this is such a motivating factor for staff and the city in general. And then obviously this option provides the highest participation in organics and recycling. You have a citywide program. Everyone has, the same education that they're getting. We're doing targeted outreach to the whole community. It's not just if you have X hauler, you're getting X information. If you have Y hauler, you're getting Y information. It's very condensed. Cons, this does take a longer period of time, not necessarily longer than other stuff. If we organize, it's all going to take a long time. But it is, say, longer than doing nothing. And then there is no stepping stone action for the community like we originally planned with using recycling and organics as that stepping stone towards trash. So that's the first recommendation. Then the pros and cons of not organizing. The pros, obviously we would comply with the mandate no matter what. Minimal staff time needed and no legal challenges because we're not taking any action, right? Everything's just kind of left as is. The cons, obviously this is more expensive for residents, as I noted, especially for organics, since that is it's not as widespread as traditional recycling. This doesn't address any of the reasons for organizing, which we all know that residents, staff, and council are passionate about. There's less participation in organics collection, which ties into it being more expensive. This also means less education, more contamination. It does not set the program up for success, which makes it harder to get it adopted widespread. And then
We have a question.
Sure.
Councilmember Supple?
Looking at that graphic, I understand that the items are loose in the cart right now for recycling. Does that mean the organics would have to have a separate cart? You couldn't just put a bag in there? Is that what that refers to? Or what's that graphic?
It's a good question. This graphic's actually just a regular Hennepin County recycling graphic. It's not organic specific. It was just on the slide, but it does mean that when we do talk about organics collection, we would have to negotiate with a hauler or haulers to figure out, is it going to be a cart system? There are other ways to collect organics out there. There are pros and cons to everything, whether it's cart or co-collection, which might be what you're thinking of, where you have it in a bag in, say, the trash cart and it has to get sorted out. There are several options out there, but yeah, the graphic is, sorry for misleading you, not related
Thank you.
to the organics part. We are trying to also indicate that this has traditionally been a recycling and organics discussion, and mostly organics. However, with these new challenges, we really have to take more of a holistic approach that includes traditional recycling and trash. So not everything that we'll talk about does solely relate to organics. And then the last con on this page is obviously not organizing does not help us meet our sustainability goals as a city. So. This is the last option, the one that we are not recommending, but is technically an option. Following state statute procedure just for recycling and organics would have increased participation, helping meet city goals. The cons, of course, it does take a longer period of time, and then the entire statute would have to be followed if and when trash was added to the conversation. So, with that being said, I wanted to give you kind of an overview of the statute timeline for organization. And so this, I just want to be clear, this is from me. Our city attorney did review the slides, but obviously she's not here to answer questions. So I'll do my best, but we might have to defer until we get those answers. So the timeline and requirements could change if I read the statute incorrectly. Basically, there are a few steps to the procedure to organizing. Number one is basic notification. You gotta make sure everyone is on the same page with what we're doing. And then number two is establishing a committee where you kind of do that background research that we've talked about. You find out your options, you look at other cities, you talk to residents, talk to haulers. You really bring everybody to the table, essentially. And then a report is issued on those findings on the talking to city council. So I also tried to give a rough estimate of the time involved. It's hard to know because we've talked to a few cities that have organized, but none that have done it recently with the last amendment, because there was an amendment in 2018. So there's no one to really compare to that I could find. So I'm just guessing it might take at least 2 months, but it really don't know. It would depend on how quickly we can get everyone together, things like that. So those are the first steps. Then the governing body considers the report and recommendations, providing public notice and holding at least one public hearing before officially deciding whether or not to organize. After this step, organized collection may begin no sooner than 6 months after the decision. So the whole process could take 6 months plus however long it takes to get to step 3. So probably at least 9-ish months to organize. There's no way to really know. Then after this decision to organize, participating haulers in the city meet and talk about waste collection issues, and there's a whole list in the statute of what gets talked about. So after that, meetings and negotiations take place for at least 60 days. This is included in those 6 months. And then approval from council on a contract with a consortium or a hauler. So that could involve at least 3 months. So anyway.
I have a question.
Sure.
For item number 5, could you talk a little bit more about what meetings/negotiations mean? So is that because there's existing contracts in place and that has to get figured out? Could we put an RFP out? I mean, what does that mean?
I can give a little answer to that. You negotiate with the haulers that are licensed in the city first because they're the consortium of haulers is the first step, and then it's my understanding that if those negotiations break down, or the haulers might not agree amongst themselves, I think, then you can put out an RFP. But the city cannot choose to put out an RFP first. You have to work with your existing haulers.
So then what determines getting a good price for your residents? And
Well, the city would have the negotiating power of, the entire number of households to go to the haulers and say, we're negotiating on behalf of, 16,000 households. Please confer amongst yourselves, submit a rate that for each household.
And then we decide the line of if that's adequate for us or not, and then we put it out.
That's the part I'm not super sure about, so I don't want to say yes.
Okay.
But maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone, Councilmember Supple?
So those negotiations could be that they like prorate it out and have a bunch of different companies do different zones.
It's based on
Or-
market share, yes.
But if negotiations would break down, then we could put it out in an RFP and like one company could take over.
Right.
Yeah.
That I believe.
So it's if the haulers all want to be part of it, then they have a incentive to negotiate
Exactly.
in good faith?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and so their existing market share, there's like a specific date, I don't know if it's at declaration or whatever their market share is at that specific date is the market share that they're entitled to. You can't just, go around trying to, promote to everyone else's customers or things like that. You're entitled to your existing customer share, and then we work from there for how the city gets serviced and how it's broken down. But yeah, those are great questions.
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor. One thought on that and then a question. With whatever point we would come to negotiating if we decide to go down this path, it's my understanding that it would help us that we had already done an RFP process for organics and recycling, that we have a sense for what that would cost in a competitive process.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have several other cities, neighboring cities to compare
yeah.
costs to as well.
We have a lot of data.
of data.
So that'll definitely help us. We have also, when we originally started this process, we did start talking to residents about their current bills. So we have, not only do we have data from what other cities are paying, but we have started to try and figure out how much are our residents paying now, and how much will their bills most likely decrease.
Okay. And then my question, looking through this timeline ahead of time, I did not follow some of the more sort of news friendly cases, but I know that specifically in St. Paul, it became a pretty big deal that there was some sort of decision made that they I think had not followed the process adequately and therefore needed to put it to a citywide vote. Is there, I guess, is that something that could happen here as well? How would that fit into the process?
Yeah, I think it has to do with our city's charter. So when we make a decision, if we make a decision how we want to go forward, residents would have the opportunity to petition or have a referendum with a vote. And I think with Bloomington and St. Paul, like you have to pause and recognize it and work with residents with the petition and that. But so you can't just forge ahead.
So it's, okay, so it's the same as any other decision that, like if petition, or if residents file a petition or like it's not specific to this process?
No, it doesn't
Okay.
have to do with the organizing statute process. It has to deal with how residents, reacted to that and that process. It's
Okay,
not
thank
statute.
you.
Yep.
City Manager Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So what happened in St. Paul and Bloomington, you are correct. It wasn't that they didn't follow the steps correctly with the organized collection statute. It was that residents got enough signatures to petition. For Bloomington, it was a change in their charter that said that you had to go to referendum in order to do organized collection. And St. Paul, I'm not as sure of the details. But for the Richfield charter, we did ask Mary to start doing some research on this. And so for the Richfield charter, there's a threshold, I think it's 5% of registered voters for to bring an initiative forward. It's 10%, I think, for to approve or disapprove an ordinance that the council has passed. And then I think it's also 10% for a charter amendment, but I could be wrong about
Here,
that
I have
threshold.
the language if you take
Okay.
it. Mary wrote, City Attorney Mary Teachin wrote, for initiative to be placed on the ballot, a petition must be submitted that is signed by at least 5% of the city's registered voters at the time of the last regular municipal election. For a referendum to be placed on the ballot, a petition must be submitted that is signed by at least 10% of the city's registered voters at the time of the last municipal election.
So that's a very real possibility, is that, I mean, this is big change for residents, and they could organize and collect enough signatures to force some kind of referendum on the process. And so it's just something that we need to be cognizant of.
All right, thank you for the questions. So back to the timeline, after the negotiations, like I said, upon agreement and finalization, approval from council is needed for a contract. And then, the contract goes into place X months later, however long is negotiated, essentially. So that's kind of the state statute in a nutshell, and what we might look at for that option. The time considerations for any options are the organics mandate in effect, as Director Markle mentioned. We do need to do something by January 1st, 2022, and organizing collection takes longer than just licensing haulers. So whatever we have plenty of time for anything, but we just need to be aware of that. Not ideal, like I mentioned, we do have things as we start to look at, for organizing collection, when it would be ideal to start a contract. And then, like I said, being cognizant of the whole entire process. I tried to get amounts of time that other cities have taken to organize because I thought that would be a helpful thing to compare to. But like I said, no one that I could find has organized after that 2018 amendment. St. Anthony organized before that, and they started their process in April, and council approved their contract in September. So that was like 6 months tight. They only took 60 days to negotiate. They have 3 haulers, so it's fairly comparable. They are a smaller city. So we are doing research already, and we'll continue that research for what this means for Richfield in the future. But I did want to end with this slide, which is a little text heavy, but it's all for good reason. We all know why we want to do this, but I think the biggest things that we need to highlight are the equity and resident protection. We have a lot of residents who might be paying a lot more than other residents for these services because they don't have the social knowledge of how to negotiate a contract, or that they can even call different haulers and say, ask for rates and things like that. And so we're really trying to look out for what is best for all residents of Richfield. And it's not just all the environmental benefits, which I think is what a lot of people gravitate towards, but it's really about making like these services which are provided by other people. They're not like city provided services, but it's providing the best pricing and the best service and the best value for all of our residents, especially those that don't really understand all the ins and outs of these services. So those are the two biggest things, and the things that we keep coming back to time and time again. The black ones are bullet points that St. Anthony Village had provided to their city council on why they wanted to do this, and all of these apply to us as well. I think it's very important to know why we want to do this and all the various reasons, and to know that the core of this is to provide residents with the best service that we can. One last note, when we met with other cities, they did note that for organizing collection, it's really important to have strong staff and strong city council opinions on this issue, because as we all know, can be a divisive issue. So as long as city staff and councils are committed to following through if this is the option for Richfield or any other city, it's proven to be successful. That is all I have.
Questions from council members? Councilmember Whalen?
Could you speak a little bit more to, because it sounds like, I guess I'll just say I'm fully in support of moving ahead to organize everything. I think, yeah, that so then if, I guess we'll hear where others are standing, but if then that is the decision, the question becomes when. And so I'm curious for more information about the comment that it's not ideal to start a contract in winter months. I guess my personal inclination would be to start sooner rather than later. I mean, we don't need to, like, if more research is needed, like, let's do that, but let's start that now and get going as soon as possible. I guess if we, first part of the question, what are you defining as winter months, since that seems to change every year? And like, I guess, more clarification on why. And then two, if we were to start the process, I mean, not necessarily tomorrow, but within a month or so, and because there's some unknowns in how long it takes, if we then completed it in like November, could we have completed it then and still start a contract in April or May?
Yeah, I think we can negotiate start dates and, when it would actually be started. And I think best practices we're learning from other cities are don't start when there's a lot of snow, because it gets trickier with new carts and snow removal and carts on the curb. So we've been advised to try to do it spring and fall, because people are often away in the summer. There's also a lot of snowbirds, people that are traveling away in the winter. So spring and fall, they said they've had the best success so far.
Thanks for your question, Councilmember. I agree with everything Director Markle said. The winter thing is for that, and in terms of contracts starting, you can finalize a contract. Like St. Anthony finalized their contract, I believe, in September, and theirs didn't start until April. So there's definitely flexibility, and all those dates are obviously set when the contract's negotiated, and that's when we would take into account, licensing terms and all these fun things. So it's definitely not, if the process ended in November, we would be starting in December or January, things like that. And then winter months usually just means like the really cold or snowy. So it is hard, because with our weather, who knows what's going to be. Yeah, exactly. We don't know. But that's obviously something we would take a closer look at when negotiating as well.
Councilmember Supple has a follow-up to that question.
So from what you're saying, we're required to do some of this by January of 2022. So that means if you didn't want to start in the winter, it would have to be done by the fall of 2021. It kind of moves up our timeline a little. Is that correct?
Yes.
City Manager Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor. I also would recommend actually that we have a long lead time because some of the problems that were happening in some of the other cities were just that they didn't do enough communication, their cans didn't get picked up from the previous company. I mean, giving a lot of lead time to both the existing haulers and the residents, I think would be prudent.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councilmember Supple?
Well, looking at the options, I don't think we would get many organics collected if we went with option 2. And it seems silly to go through all the bureaucracy twice with option 3. So I guess I would support option 1 and start doing the research and get moving on things as soon as we can so that we have some time so we aren't trying to do everything at the last minute.
I would agree with the other 2 council members that I am in support of option 1. I think the question and concerns that I have between A and B, I mean, I would like to know the staffing resources, the financial impact, all of the different things we need to be taking into account to move forward successfully. And so I guess I'm in support of A, which, not to see if anything happens with agencies. Not that part. Taking time to research, create a plan, because we're going to be doing our strategic planning, and I want to take a big picture. I don't feel comfortable making a decision with very limited information to get started now, because I don't know what the implications are of that on many different levels. So those are the things that I would want to get a better understanding, because is that going to be one of our main or possibly the main focus, for the next year and a half or however long it takes as a city because of the resources it's going to take, the staff. I don't have a strong understanding of that. So I just really want to know the resources and implications it will take to do that, and then scope that out in relation to all of our other city priorities, needs, budget items as well. Councilmember Supple, did you have something?
Well, I had a follow-up question related to what you were just talking about. When we were interviewing new commissioners, the question came up of who would deal with this. Is this a sustainability commission task? Is this a community services commission task? Is there another group that would deal with this? So whose purview does this fall under?
We were hoping that this could be a charge of the Sustainability Commission, because I think it falls under their charge of the work that they're going to be supporting and helping move forward. So we could utilize them as the committee.
Councilmember Whalen?
Does it not also require the establishment of a separate committee?
We would have to look into, yes, I do. I think it does, because there are other people besides residents who are required to submit opinions, like haulers and things like that. So I think we would have to establish a separate committee, but I think using the Sustainability Committee for, as the city commission that is applicable to these issues, I don't think they would be the ones that are,
Got it.
yeah,
Thank you.
right, yeah. They wouldn't be that committee per se, but they would be involved in the process.
Definitely one of their big charges is going to be education and helping table and get the word out, so we could, utilize the Sustainability Commission. I'm thinking like farmers markets and different events to help put education out there about the program once we have clear path that will go down.
I did have 2.
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Whalen.
I was just gonna ask, and I think I've asked this before, so I should know this, but can you remind me the timeline of the other strategic planning? And it does, because I agree with the thought behind that, but I guess I would be, I'm somewhat opposed to shooting for fall of 2021 as the start date. I think it would be smarter to shoot for spring, so that if complications arise, we have room to back it up to fall and are not shooting for fall and then scrambling to get something in place by January. So I guess I'm wondering, based on the strategic planning timeline, would that still give us 9 months to until May of 2021?
Thank you, Councilmember Whalen. Yeah, I think it would. So we're going to be giving council an update on that about mid-March and hopefully getting going early April, if not sooner. But so I think that we can be doing the research on this. The mayor gave us a pretty good list on where we need to get more details, and I've been taking notes. So I think as we do more research, get some more answers, that timeline could be filled out. But we could certainly try to pull together something that we would be able to implement it in spring of 2021. And if something came out in that research, we could be able to push it back. And I do actually like your suggestion that, say, if there was a petition to challenge the organized hauling, that would give us more time. So
I like that as well. Thank you, Councilmember Whalen.
And
Yep, Councilmember Whalen.
sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot. One final comment. Given I think it was a very insightful comment, what you said about the need for staff and council members to be fully on board with this, knowing kind of the controversy it can raise. I know we have a quorum tonight and that officially we can give direction, but I just would ask probably City Manager Rodriguez to follow up. I think I know where Councilmember Troutman and Garcia are at, but it'd be worth following up with them just to make sure they're on the same page.
I actually have a check-in scheduled with Councilmember Garcia tomorrow and trying to set one up with Councilmember Troutman, so I will do that.
Thank you.
Yep, Rachel.
Yep. So 2 things I did want to note when we were talking about working with haulers and consortiums and all that. Most, if not all, of the licensed residential haulers in Richfield are already involved in at least one consortium, so they have experience and know how this process goes and are bringing, that experience to the table. So that is nice to have haulers that, know how it is gonna go, and provide that experience. And then the other thing is, I just wanted to note for the record that we're not officially asking council to declare to organize, as that would start the process or anything. Like we mentioned in the beginning, we were just asking for direction, which we have gotten on conducting further research in this realm, but it's not an official declaration.
Great. Any other comments or questions from council? Thank you so much for the update and giving us all the context as to how this started. And thank you for the presentation. All right, I will adjourn our work sessions.